How to talk to an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old about PDA. How to explain it to them, how it affects them. Sometimes we won't be able to, depending on the individual. A lot of PDAs do not like to be told who they are, how their brain works, don't want you to give them information about identity because it's a compromise to autonomy. There are those of us who have such a heightened need, or not a heightened need, we have a biological need for exceptional amounts of autonomy. And being autodidactic means that we like to discover things on our own and follow our interests and learn in ways that we choose. Many families put things around the house and hope that our loved ones will find them and pick them up and read them. That's a tricky one because PDAs are very intelligent, very switched on, can sniff an agenda from miles away. Even strewing can be walking that tightrope between trying to help them and triggering them and impacting trust. There are blogs and vlogs, video channels on YouTube and things like that for PDA kids talking about their own experiences. Honesty and trust is next level for a PDA. That me sitting here saying, here's a way that you might be able to do it without them catching on, that feels very dishonest for me. And when parents ask me things like, how can I get my child to go to school? Or it really depends on what it is. And I do understand from many perspectives. It's very challenging having had the experience of being one of those children to provide strategies. I even feel reactive to the word strategy, and I prefer to say tool. But yes, I guess for me, because I am PDA, I've always talked about it. And sometimes we have a very open dialogue, my children and I, and they might say, you know what, this happened today, and this is what I felt about it. And I might come in and say, yeah, I have that too. I know for me, it's about my PDA. And then I talk about it a little bit because it's declarative. I'm telling a story about my own experience and I'm owning that story. I'm not saying to my child, oh, I know what's happening there. This is what it is. That wouldn't work with my children. I just relate because it keeps us as equals. As soon as I move into the role of, how about we do some learning together about that? I know that a lot of people will say, that's collaboration. That is not collaboration. That is, how about we learn together? This here is collaboration. And collaboration is, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I wonder if I do that. It's being equals in the conversation, not giving advice that's unsolicited. And that's really hard when we're parents because we are born into a culture where not only are we conditioned to parent in particular ways, there's a primitive drive there to be protective, to guide our children, to prevent them from harm. And the feeling of powerlessness around raising PDAs is very real. I've had to learn the hard way because I was very controlling with my two elder children. They got a very different parent from me, to engage in discussions in the same way I would with a friend, being curious and open. And my children and I, we trigger each other. There are times where they will share something, and if I ask too many questions, or if I say, oh, okay, what does that mean? Or can you tell me more about that? Sometimes that's triggering because what's actually happening is that they feel misunderstood or nobody understands this experience. Or if I ask the question, can you tell me more about that? It's delicate. It's really fragile. However, if the relational safety is there, those infractions can be overcome very quickly. And using humour, being silly, is really helpful as well. But I find incidental ways to bring it up. Many of our children love role play. Role play, my child has so many stuffed animals that they hang from the roof in nets in their room. When PDAs love role play or they have stuffed animals, and a lot of our children do, or they have interests like it's usually going to be centered around living beings with personalities and creating personalities. It's going to be centered around psychology or characters. Using that to communicate is really productive. Following their interests and somehow weaving in the elements of talking about the nervous system, because the process for a PDA is the same for every human being except far less intense. Anxiety is healthy. The nervous system being activated is what keeps us alive, what alerts us to danger. That is a human experience. But for a PDA, it is far more intense. And we have this reactive state that is similar to a person who has experienced trauma. There's a number of ways that we can talk about it by looking at their interests. And it's okay if they don't want to know about it. Especially teenagers, I find that for teenagers, it's a rite of passage to be quote unquote normal. For teenagers, it's often not safe to identify as different or to be different. And so I really honour that process for my children. One of my children is autistic, is not ashamed of being autistic, but doesn't tell people about it. And I respect that for them. That's their choice. To me, it's bizarre because it's all I ever talk about. However, they also grew up with a mother whose special interest was neurodivergence, and it's all they ever heard about, and they're PDA. So it makes sense to me that they don't want to identify or talk about it.